Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a seriously fascinating philosophy on travel from Beyond the Checklist, Finding Japan's True Rhythm. You know that feeling when you get back from a vacation and you feel like you desperately need a second vacation just to recover from the first one? Yeah, we've all been there. Well, today we are going to look at what happens when you completely ditch those exhausting checklists, drop the FOMO, and instead start searching for a deeper, slower rhythm in the places you visit. Okay, let's dive right into this with a really simple scenario that actually sparked this whole mindset shift. Is any bowl of ramen actually worth an hour of your life standing on a sidewalk? Our source material shares this great story about a traveler heading to Kitakata, which is a city that is super famous for its ramen. They walked up to the absolute most famous local spot, only to find, about 40 people standing in line. Now, what do most of us do in that situation? We wait, right? But this traveler took one look at that line, turned right around, walked 100 meters down the street, and ate at a quiet, totally unhyped local ramen shop instead. They finished their bowl, hit the road, and felt absolutely zero regrets.
And that right there represents a huge psychological shift, perfectly summed up in this idea. There's no experience worth disrupting my own rhythm. Think about it. In the past, this same traveler admitted they would have just stood in that line. The old tourist logic always tells us, hey, since you're already here, you literally have to try the famous one. It feels like a total waste to walk away when you are right at the door. But as they traveled more, they just completely rejected that logic. Because the truth is, standing in a line for an hour for a bowl of noodles disrupts the exact pace and rhythm you're traveling to find in the first place.
Which leads us to part one, the illusion of must-sees.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when you break away from that illusion. When people first travel Japan's classic golden route, Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, Nara, and Kamakura, everything feels breathtaking and incredibly rare. But as our source material reveals, the more you travel, the more that scarcity is exposed as a complete illusion. Take the internationally famous Shirakawa-go village. It draws massive, massive crowds for its historic thatched roof architecture. But then you compare it to Gokayama, which is another stunning, historic Edo period village just without the insane hype. After visiting 42 different Japanese prefectures, the author noticed these places really begin to blur together. Honestly, if you mixed up the photos of these two villages, most people wouldn't even be able to tell which is which.
This exposes what's perfectly described as the marketing illusion. Tourism boards absolutely love their lists, don't they? The top 3 views, the 3 great gardens, the 100 famous castles. For instance, tourists will literally flock to Tateyama Kurobe for its famous towering snow walls. But here's the secret the author discovered while driving around. You can find massive snow walls in Hachimantai or along the quiet mountain roads of Zao. Sure, they might be slightly shorter and have zero marketing hype, but they are just as breathtaking. Even Matsushima, proudly marketed as one of Japan's top 3 scenic views, is ultimately just a bay with islands. And guess what? Japan has plenty of gorgeous bays. These famous attractions aren't actually as irreplaceable as we are led to believe. They just have a much better marketing team.
So what is the alternative? That brings us to section 2, discovering everyday local life. Once you realize the must-see spots are mostly just clever marketing, your entire travel strategy shifts. You realize you haven't actually become numb to travel. You're just kind of over curated tourist experiences. The new strategy is brilliantly simple. Stop at the sites and start at the supermarket. Seriously, instead of rushing to crowded historical monuments, this traveler now heads straight to convenience stores, local supermarkets, and train stations. They just walk the streets. They watch commuters heading to work, observe the local students, and look at where actual residents sit down to eat a quick lunch. Sites will show you a polished performance, but a grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon? That shows you the absolute truth of a city. Let's look at Sendai as an example. A standard guidebook is going to point you to beef tongue restaurants, the ruins of Obaba Castle, and these busy shopping arcades. But the real Sendai experience? For the author, the absolute most valuable part of visiting wasn't any of those tourist traps. It was just a simple walk from Sendai Station down to the Itsukubashi area, passing through totally normal, everyday residential neighborhoods. That one simple walk gave them significantly more authentic information about the city's true vibe than any heavily recommended tourist attraction ever could. All right, moving into section 3, the specialty coffee index. So, if we are completely ditching the guidebooks, how do we actually judge a city's vibe? Well, our source uses a slightly weird but incredibly accurate personal metric, the specialty coffee index. But before we get into how it works, we kind of need to define what specialty coffee culture actually means in Japan right now. This is a relatively young scene that focuses intensely on specialty roasts, flat whites, and artisanal brewing. It is really distinct from the traditional Japanese kisaten, or old-school cafés. In those traditional shops, coffee is often just a sidekick to a slice of cake or a light meal. But this modern specialty coffee wave, it represents something much, much deeper about the local population. Now, what's really interesting about this is how a good flat white actually translates perfectly into demographic data. The author totally admits this isn't exactly a rigorous scientific study, but the hit rate is incredibly high. Basically, if a city has a thriving specialty coffee scene, it acts as an indicator for 4 key things. First, openness, meaning the city is actually willing to embrace new ideas. Second, flow, showing it has a dynamic, moving population rather than a stagnant one. Third, youth, highlighting a sense of energy and modern cultural shifts. And finally, internationalization, proving a global connection and diversity. So yeah, a well-crafted cup of coffee is actually this neat cultural cheat sheet for a city's willingness to experiment.
Which brings us to a pretty controversial question in Section 4. Why Fukuoka over Kyoto?
Armed with this completely new mindset and that coffee index we just talked about, the author arrived at a really fascinating shift in city preference. Let's talk about Kyoto. It is undeniably beautiful. It holds Japan's deepest history, and it actually used to be the author's absolute favorite city. But today, it kind of feels like a massive historical museum completely overrun by over-tourism. It almost has a theme park feel to it. Now, contrast that with Fukuoka. Fukuoka is this relaxed seaport, but it's also a highly vibrant, energetic city. It manages to strike this perfect, active balance between honoring its tradition and welcoming modern vitality. Now, the situation in Kyoto is incredibly complex. The author points out that places like Kiyomizu-dera, Gion, and Nishiki Market hardly even belong to the locals anymore. They essentially belong to the tourists. And we have to neutrally acknowledge the very valid, very real feelings of Kyoto's residents here, which is often captured by the sentiment, "This is my city, not your theme park." While Kyoto remains absolutely stunning and historically vital, the day-to-day local life has become nearly impossible to see under the sheer crush of visitors. Because our traveler is now specifically looking for that authentic local rhythm, Fukuoka has become their absolute favorite city in Japan. Fukuoka is essentially stuck in the middle, but in the best way possible. It isn't Tokyo, where absolutely everything exists in this overwhelming abundance, but it's also not a quiet, typical regional town where nothing happens. It occupies this perfectly comfortable middle ground. It has its own unique temper, a famously strong coffee culture, and a lifestyle that just feels deeply natural and inviting. Let's wrap this up with Section 5, Travel as a Personal Mirror. Let's move to see how this builds, because this entire journey away from exhausting itineraries and checklist tourism really represents a deep philosophical evolution across a traveler's life. It happens in phases. Step 1 is collecting sights. When you're young or new to traveling, you want the spectacular, the rare, the checklist. You just want to see it all. Step 2 is filtering the irrelevant. As you travel more, you realize you don't actually need to see every single temple or every snow wall, so you start filtering out the noise. And finally, you arrive at Step 3, finding the rhythm. This is where that burning desire for spectacular scarcity gives way to finding a comfortable, authentic local lifestyle that actually resonates with your own personal pace. When you finally reach that third step, you start seeking out these un-guidebook experiences. The most memorable parts of a trip, they almost never appear on internet rankings. They're just simple things. Enjoying a single, perfectly roasted cup of coffee, walking down a totally random local street, observing the quiet hum of a residential community, or just getting a glimpse into an ordinary person's daily routine. These moments leave the absolute deepest impressions because they're real. They aren't put on for tourists. Ultimately, this leads to one incredibly powerful realization. Travel is not about knowing the world, but knowing yourself. Think about it. The author notes that the cities themselves, Kyoto, Tokyo, Sendai, they haven't actually changed at all. They are right where they have always been. The only thing that has truly changed is the traveler observing them. As the traveler grew, their need to constantly tick boxes completely vanished, and it was replaced by this genuine desire for connection. So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a question to ponder for your own life. What is the real rhythm of the next city you visit? Seriously, the next time you pack your bags, try ditching the checklist. Skip the hour-long line for famous ramen, take a walk through a supermarket, grab a local coffee, and just look for the true everyday pulse of your destination. You might just find exactly what you have been looking for. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey, and I will catch you next time.